I was 67 years old when my son told me not to come home for Christmas. The text came in just after sunset while I was standing alone in my kitchen folding wrapping paper I suddenly didn't need. Don't come for Christmas, Dad. Lauren doesn't feel comfortable with you around. I read it slowly once, then again, not we, not I. Lauren doesn't want you. My name is Walter Grayson. I'm a retired structural engineer from Ohio. I spent 39 years designing buildings meant to last longer than the people inside them. I raised my son after his mother passed away. I paid for his education, his car, his first place. I believed family was something you built carefully and protected. I stared at the screen, calm on the outside, while something cold and sharp settled in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just understanding. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked around the house. The quiet rooms, the familiar walls, the place I had bought years ago when my son couldn't qualify for the loan. The house everyone now called his. I smiled to myself, softly, silently, because my son didn't know what I still owned, and he was about to find out. The text arrived while I was wrapping the last gift. I remember that clearly, the sound of paper tearing just a little too much, the way the tape stuck to my thumb. It was a sweater I'd picked out weeks ago, navy blue. Evan always liked dark colors. I'd even kept the receipt just in case. My phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't think much of it, probably a delivery update or a holiday ad. I wiped my hands on a dish towel before picking it up. It was Evan. Dad, I should have told you sooner. Lauren doesn't think it's a good idea for you to come for Christmas this year. I stood there staring at the words, the tape dispenser still in my other hand. The kitchen felt suddenly too quiet, like the house was holding its breath with me. I read it again, slower this time, not we decided, not I'm sorry, just Lauren doesn't think it's a good idea. I set the tape down carefully like it might break if I wasn't gentle with it. My first instinct was to call him, to hear his voice, to laugh it off and say there had to be some mistake, but I didn't. I stayed where I was and read the message a third time, letting every word sink in. I typed back, erased it, typed again. What's wrong? The response came quickly. It's nothing you did, she's just been stressed. You know how she is, I don't want things to be awkward. There it was, the familiar sidestep, the soft push away without ever taking responsibility for the shove. I leaned against the counter and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. This wasn't new, not really, it was just clearer now. I thought back to Thanksgiving last year when Lauren insisted they eat early because her parents were coming later. Evan told me it would be better if I skipped it. Then my birthday dinner that got rescheduled twice and never happened. The phone calls that grew shorter, the invitations that stopped coming altogether. Each time there was an explanation, work stress, bad timing, Lauren's anxiety. And each time Evan passed it along like a neutral messenger, as if he wasn't choosing a side by saying nothing at all. I typed again. So you want me to stay home? There was a pause this time, long enough for my screen to dim. I just think it's best for everyone. For everyone, I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because if I didn't I might have said something I couldn't take back. I looked down at the sweater on the table, half-wrapped, and felt something tighten in my chest. I'd raised Evan to speak plainly, to stand behind his decisions. Somewhere along the way, he'd learned how to hide behind someone else's comfort instead. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I didn't remind him of the years I'd shown up to every school play, every late-night call, every problem he didn't know how to fix. None of that mattered in this moment. I simply replied, okay. The message showed as read, no response came back. I stood there for a long time after that, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's car starting up. Christmas lights blinked outside the window, cheerful and indifferent. That was when I realized something else. This wasn't just about Christmas, it was about replacement. Somewhere along the line, I hadn't just been moved aside, I'd been edited out, quietly, politely. Like an old piece of furniture no one wanted to throw away, but no one wanted in the room either. I walked into the living room and sat down, phone still in my hand. My eyes drifted to the bookshelf across from me, old manuals, photo albums, a thin folder tucked between two hardcovers. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were papers most people forget about once life moves on, deeds, agreements, signatures that mattered only when someone decided they didn't. I didn't open the folder yet, I just looked at it. And for the first time since that text arrived, I felt something solid beneath the sadness. Because Christmas wasn't the only thing Evan thought he could take from me, and he had no idea what my name was still written on. I bought the house 5 years ago, back when Evan still called me every Sunday and asked for advice like my opinion mattered. He and Lauren had just gotten married, young, excited, talking fast about the future. They wanted something bigger than their apartment, a yard, a guest room, a place that felt permanent. But there was a problem Evan tried to soften before saying out loud his credit wasn't strong enough yet. Student loans, a few missed payments when he'd been between jobs, nothing dramatic but enough for the bank to say no. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with him, papers spread out, the smell of coffee in the air. He looked embarrassed, kept apologizing like he was asking me for a favor he didn't deserve. Dad, we'll figure something else out, he said. I don't want you feeling pressured. I waved him off. I had savings. I'd worked nearly 4 decades, lived carefully, planned for retirement. This was exactly what that money was for as far as I was concerned. Helping my son get started, giving him stability I hadn't always had, so I made the down payment, a large one, enough to secure a good mortgage rate. The house itself was a clean, modest place in a quiet neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a garage, nothing flashy. The kind of house you grow into. For credit reasons, the mortgage went in my name. Just temporarily, we agreed. Once Evan built his credit back up, we'd refinance. That was the plan, simple, practical, family. Don't worry about it, ID said, it's just paperwork. Lauren smiled then, a wide, grateful smile. She hugged me longer than usual and called me generous, said I was an amazing father-in-law. For a while I believed her. The first year was smooth. They moved in, painted the walls, sent me photos of the living room furniture. Evan joked about finally owning a lawn mower. Lauren asked my opinion about throw pillows and backsplash tile, but slowly things shifted, not all at once. Nothing you could point to and say there, that's when it changed. It was little things. Lauren started referring to it as our house when she talked to friends. Evan stopped mentioning the mortgage altogether. They remodeled the kitchen without asking. When I brought it up casually, Lauren laughed and said, "Oh, don't worry, we're investing in it." Investing, I let it slide. I told myself it was natural. They lived there. Of course it felt like theirs. I didn't want to be that parent, the one who kept score, the one who reminded their kids what they owed. But there were moments that stuck with me. Once, at a family barbecue, someone complimented the house. Lauren squeezed Evan's arm and said, "We worked so hard to get this place." I noticed Evan didn't correct her. He didn't look at me, just nodded along. Another time I mentioned refinancing again gently. Evan said they'd talk about it later. Lauren changed the subject. Later never came. I started feeling like a guest in a place I'd paid for. Then came the renovations. Walls moved, fixtures upgraded, decisions made without so much as a phone call. When I asked about permits, Lauren rolled her eyes and said, "Dad, it's fine. Everyone does this stuff." Dad, she started calling me that less and less. The language changed too. It was thanks for helping us anymore. It was we deserve this and we've built so much here. As if the house had risen up from their effort alone, as if my role had ended the moment the keys changed hands. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being sensitive. That aging had made me clingy, but deep down I felt something uncomfortable forming, a sense that what I thought was temporary had quietly become permanent in their minds. Still, I said nothing because I loved my son. Because I didn't want to lose him over a piece of paper. That night after the Christmas text, I finally pulled the folder from the shelf. I opened it slowly, like I already knew what I'd find but needed to see it anyway. The deed sat there, clean and official. One name printed clearly, mine. Lauren didn't change Evan overnight. She rewrote him line by line, quietly, until I barely recognized the man I'd raised. At first, it was subtle enough to dismiss, a tone, a look, a pause where warmth used to be. The first time I felt it was at a dinner party they hosted about 2 years after moving into the house. Lauren had invited some friends from work, people I'd never met. I showed up with a bottle of wine and the kind of cautious optimism you bring when you don't want to be in the way. She greeted me with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, you made it," she said. "Not I'm glad you're here, just you made it." At the table, someone asked how long Evan and Lauren had been homeowners. Lauren laughed lightly and said, "Long enough to know it's a lot of responsibility. Some people don't realize how hard it is." She glanced at me when she said it, just a second, long enough to sting. I smiled politely. Evan said nothing. Later that night, one of her friends complimented the kitchen renovation. Lauren beamed. "That was all us," she said. "We sacrificed a lot to make this place what it is." I waited. Surely Evan would say something, a joke, a correction, anything. He didn't. That was the moment I understood something important. Lauren didn't need to insult me outright. She just needed Evan not to defend me. After that, the comments came more freely. "Oh, Walter, you still do things the old-fashioned way," she'd say, laughing, when I suggested a contractor or asked about permits. "You know how men your age are with paperwork," she joked once in front of relatives. Each time she wrapped it in humor. Each time Evan stayed quiet. Sometimes he smiled, the way people do when they don't want to rock the boat. I tried talking to him privately, just once. "Does Lauren have a problem with me?" I asked gently over the phone. He sighed. "Dad, you're overthinking it. She's just particular. Please don't make this into something." That hurt more than anything she'd said, because he wasn't denying it. He was asking me to tolerate it. The exclusion became more obvious. Lauren answered Evan's phone more often than not. When I suggested stopping by, there was always a reason it wasn't a good time. When I did visit, she found reasons to be busy, distracted elsewhere. I started noticing how Evan spoke around her, shorter sentences, careful words. Like he was checking his tone before finishing a thought. Once, at a family gathering, Lauren corrected him mid-sentence about a childhood story he was telling. "That's not how it happened," she said sharply. "You're remembering it wrong." He laughed it off. I watched my son shrink in front of people who didn't know him the way I did. That was when I realized something else. Lauren wasn't just pushing me out, she was replacing my version of Evan with hers. The son who used to call me for advice now deferred to his wife on everything. The man who used to stand up for himself now avoided conflict at all costs. And the easiest way to avoid conflict was to let me take the hit. Still, I held on. I told myself marriage was complicated, that everyone had growing pains, that this was temporary. Until Thanksgiving, Lauren seated me at the far end of the table, literally away from Evan. She controlled the conversation like a conductor, steering it away from anything that included me. When I tried to tell a story about Evan as a kid, she cut in. "Oh, he hates when people bring that stuff up," she said, smiling tightly. Evan didn't say a word. That night, I drove home with a knot in my chest I couldn't untangle. I realized I'd spent the entire evening watching my son pretend I wasn't part of him anymore. By the time Christmas came around, the distance felt permanent. So when the text arrived, "Don't come for Christmas," it didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final sentence in a conversation that had been happening for years. And this time it wasn't subtle. It wasn't wrapped in humor. As a door closing, Christmas wasn't just another holiday. It was the breaking point. I didn't argue with Evan. That was the part no one expected. After reading his message for the 5th time, I set my phone down and stood there in the quiet. No raised voice, no shaking hands, just a strange calm that settled over me like a heavy coat. I smiled, not because I was amused, because I understood something I hadn't before. Begging wouldn't bring my son back. Explaining wouldn't change his mind. If I pushed, he'd retreat further into Lauren's comfort, into the life where I was already being edited out. So instead of reacting, I chose restraint. People mistake restraint for weakness. They think silence means surrender, but restraint is power when you know exactly what you're holding. I picked up my phone again and typed carefully. No emotion, no accusations, just clarity. "I understand I won't come for Christmas." I stopped there for a moment, then added one more line. "We should talk soon." I pressed send. The message showed as delivered, then read. No response came back. That told me everything I needed to know. I didn't pace the room. I didn't replay old memories or imagine speeches I'd never give. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked straight ahead, letting the reality settle in. My son had chosen silence over me, so I chose action. I opened my laptop and pulled up the county records website, the same one I'd used years ago when I first bought the house. I typed in the address slowly, deliberately. There it was: property details, ownership history. My name still sat at the top, not Evan's, not Lauren's, mine. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. This wasn't revenge, not yet. This was about balance, about reminding people that decisions have weight. I thought back to all the moments I'd swallowed discomfort to keep the peace. Every time I'd accepted being sidelined because I didn't want to cause friction. All that patience had taught Evan one thing: that I would always absorb the blow. He was wrong. Restraint isn't endless. It's strategic. I didn't want to punish my son. I wanted him to wake up. And sometimes the only way to wake someone is to let them feel the ground shift beneath their feet. I drafted another message, this one even shorter. "Evan, we need to discuss the house. Please call me." I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally my phone rang. "Dad," he said, voice tight, "what's this about?" "The house," I repeated calmly, "the one you told me not to come to for Christmas." There was a pause. I could hear Lauren in the background, her voice muffled but sharp. "Dad, this isn't a good time," Evan said. "Lauren's upset. Can we do this later?" "Later, always later." "No," I said gently, "now is fine." He exhaled sharply. "What about the house?" "I've been thinking," I said, "about boundaries, about respect." Another pause, longer this time. "I don't understand," he said. "That's okay," I replied, "you will." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him of anything. I simply stated facts. The house was in my name. It always had been. The arrangement had been temporary. We discussed that, and since I was no longer welcome there, it was time to revisit that arrangement. "You can't be serious," Evan said, panic creeping into his voice. "I am." "This is because of Christmas?" he asked. "Dad, that's extreme." I almost laughed at that. "What's extreme," I said quietly, "is being told not to come to a home I paid for. What's extreme is realizing my presence is optional, but my resources are expected." Lauren's voice cut in then, no longer muffled. "You're being manipulative." I ignored her. "I'm giving you time," I continued, speaking only to my son. "Not punishment time." "How much time?" he asked. I looked at the calendar on the wall, counted the days. 30 days, I said. The silence on the other end was complete. "You can't do that," Evan finally whispered. "I can," I replied, "and I am." I ended the call before he could say anything else. My hands were steady when I set the phone down. My heart wasn't racing. I felt grounded, anchored by the certainty that I'd done the right thing, not the easy thing. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street. Christmas lights glowed softly on neighboring houses. Life going on, unaware that a line had just been crossed. I didn't smile because I was cruel. I smiled because I had stopped begging. And because my son was about to learn something important, you don't replace people who still hold the keys. The knock came just before noon the next day, not a polite knock, not the kind you give when you're unsure you should even be there. This was loud, fast, desperate. The kind of knock that says something has already gone wrong. I didn't rush to the door. I finished rinsing my coffee mug, set it carefully in the sink, and wiped my hands on a towel. My heart was steady. Whatever panic was waiting on the other side of that door didn't belong to me. The knocking came again, harder this time. Dad, please open the door. I recognized Evan's voice immediately, strained, breathless, nothing like the calm, detached tone from his text the night before. I took one last breath and opened the door. He stood there with his jacket half-zipped, hair messy, eyes wide like he'd driven too fast to get here. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, pacing my entryway as if the floor might give him answers. "What the hell was that call?" he said, running a hand through his hair. "You can't just say something like that and hang up." I closed the door behind him and locked it, slow and deliberate. "I didn't hang up," I said calmly. "I ended the conversation." He stared at me, disbelief written all over his face. "Dad, you said 30 days, you can't be serious." "I am," I said again, motioning toward the living room. "Sit down." He didn't. He kept standing, arms crossed, weight shifting from foot to foot. "Lauren's freaking out," he said. "She didn't sleep at all. She thinks you're trying to scare us." I studied him for a moment, really looked at him. My son, 36 years old, a grown man, and yet he looked like a teenager who'd just been told he was grounded. "This isn't about fear," I said. "It's about reality." "What reality?" he snapped. "That's our house. We've lived there for years." I nodded slowly. "You've lived there, yes." He blinked. "Dad, come on, you know what I mean." "Do I asked. He finally sat down, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "This is insane. You're blowing everything up over one misunderstanding." "One text," I corrected, "one choice." He looked up at me, eyes red. "You're my father. You're supposed to support me." "I have," I said quietly, "for a long time." He stood again, frustration spilling over. "Then why are you doing this?" I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out the folder I'd been thinking about since Christmas Eve. The thin one. The one most people forget exists until it suddenly matters. I placed it on the coffee table between us. "What's that?" he asked. "Open it." He hesitated, then flipped it open. His brow furrowed as he scanned the pages. Mortgage statements, purchase documents, the deed. He froze. "Dad," he said slowly, "why is your name still on this?" I met his eyes, "Because it always was." "No," he said, shaking his head. "We talked about refinancing, we just needed more time." "And I gave you time," I said, "5 years of it." "But it's our home," he insisted, his voice cracking now. "We put everything into it." "You put furniture into it," I replied gently. "Memories, I put my name on the loan, my money on the line." He looked back down at the papers like he was hoping they'd change if he stared long enough. "You never said you'd do this," he whispered. "I never said I'd accept being erased," I answered. Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable. He sank back onto the couch. "Lauren's going to lose it," he said. I didn't respond. "You don't understand how upset she is," he continued. "She feels attacked. She thinks you're trying to control us." I almost laughed at that, almost. "Evan," I said, sitting across from him, "when did protecting myself become controlling you?" He didn't answer because he didn't have one. Instead, he said something else, something quieter, something truer. "She didn't think you'd push back." There it was, I nodded. "Neither did you." His phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced at the screen, then looked away. "It's Lauren," he said. "She wants to talk to you." I stood up. "No," I said. "She can react however she wants. This conversation was always between you and me." He swallowed hard. "She's not going to take this well." I walked to the window and looked out at the street, calm and unchanged. "I know," I said. Behind me, Evan stood slowly, gathering his jacket, his confidence nowhere to be found. I'll talk to her," he said. "We'll figure something out." I turned back to him. "You have 30 days. He nodded once stiffly, then walked out the door. As it closed behind him, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I already knew who it was. Lauren was reacting. I didn't go to the house alone. That was a decision I made carefully after sleeping on it for exactly one night. If I was going to step back into that place, not as a guest, not as a father trying to keep the peace, but as the legal owner, I wanted witnesses, paper trails, professionals. So 2 days after Evan left my house, I pulled into the driveway with a licensed inspector named Martin Hale riding shotgun. Mid-50s, quiet, clipboard already in hand. The kind of man who spoke only when there was something worth saying. Evan knew we were coming. I texted him the night before, short, clear, property inspection tomorrow at 10. This is a legal right. Lauren didn't respond. Evan sent back a single word, fine. When we walked in, the house smelled different than I remembered. Stronger, chemical. New paint layered over something older, like someone trying to erase history instead of improve it. Martin started in the living room. He frowned almost immediately. Who did this work? He asked, pointing at the widened doorway. I don't know, I said. He tapped the wall lightly. The sound was hollow where it shouldn't have been. This was load-bearing, he said. My stomach tightened. You're sure? Yes, whoever removed this did it without reinforcing the structure properly. He wrote something down. We moved room to room. Each step uncovered something worse. Electrical wiring rerouted without permits. Plumbing lines changed at odd angles. A bathroom remodel where the tile hid moisture damage under. In the kitchen, Martin crouched and pressed against the floor with his thumb. It's soft, he said. Water intrusion long-term. How long? I asked. Months, maybe longer. I leaned against the counter to steady myself. This wasn't cosmetic. This wasn't style choices or personal taste. This was damage, structural, expensive. Did they pull any permits? Martin asked. No, I said quietly. They didn't. He nodded once, like he'd expected that answer. By the time we finished, his clipboard was full. This is serious, he said, meeting my eyes. Repairs could run into the tens of thousands, and that's before code enforcement gets involved. Tens of thousands. The words echoed in my head as Evan arrived home from work, his face tightening the moment he saw Martin's truck in the driveway. What's this? He asked, looking between us. An inspection, I said. You were informed. Lauren appeared behind him, arms crossed, jaw tight. You had no right, she snapped. This is our home. Martin didn't look at her. He kept writing. I had every right, I replied. It's my property. Her eyes flashed. You're doing this on purpose. You're trying to scare us. I'm documenting reality, I said. There's a difference. Martin finished his notes and handed me his card. I'll send a full report by Friday. When he left, the house felt smaller, tighter. Lauren turned on me the moment the door closed. You went behind our backs, she said. You embarrassed us. I gave notice, I said, and you altered the house without permission. We improved it, she shot back. You should be thanking us. For illegal renovations, I asked calmly. Evan stepped between us. Can we just slow down for a second? Lauren rounded on him. No, we are not slowing down. Your father is trying to destroy us. I looked at my son. He looked tired, torn. This isn't destruction, I said. This is consequence. Lauren laughed sharply. You think you can just walk in here, wave paperwork around, and make us homeless without anyone noticing? I think the law notices, I replied. Her smile disappeared. Do you know how this looks? She said, voice low now, dangerous. An old man evicting his own son right before Christmas. Evan's head snapped up. Lauren. She ignored him. People would be very interested in that story. Social media would love it. The news might too. I felt the shift instantly. This wasn't family conflict anymore. This was a threat. You wouldn't, Evan said. She looked at him coldly. Watch me. Then she looked back at me. You think you're winning, she said, but I can make you the villain overnight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, do what you need to do. Her eyes narrowed. She hadn't expected that. As I walked out of the house, the weight of what I'd seen pressed heavily on my chest. Not just the damage to the property, but the damage to my son. The way he'd let this happen. The way he still didn't see it clearly. Behind me, Lauren was already pulling out her phone, and I knew exactly what she was planning next. It started the next morning. I didn't know that at first. I woke up early, made coffee, read the local paper like I always did. No alarms, no sense of urgency, just habit, routine, the kind of calm that comes from knowing you've already made your move. It wasn't until Frank called me that I realized Lauren hadn't wasted any time. Walter, he said, skipping the greeting, you might want to stay off Facebook today. I smiled faintly. Why, yes, that. There was a pause on the other end, then he said it. She's telling people you're trying to throw your own son out on the street right before Christmas. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. So this was her play. Frank kept talking. She's posted photos of the house, Christmas decorations, long captions about toxic parents and emotional abuse. She didn't name you, but everyone knows. I figured, I said. You figured, he repeated. Walter, people are commenting, taking sides. Well, I'm sure they are. I hung up after that and sat at the kitchen table for a long time, my coffee untouched. Then I picked up my phone, not to respond, not to defend myself, but to see. Lauren had written paragraphs, carefully worded, emotional. She talked about boundaries, about protecting her family, about how some people think money gives them control over their children. She never lied outright. She didn't have to. She just framed the truth until it bent in her favor. Friends I barely remembered. Strangers offered sympathy, someone suggested legal action, another called me cruel. Evan commented once, just once, "Please stop, this is private." Lauren replied with a heart emoji. That was it. I didn't comment, I didn't message her, I didn't explain myself to people who'd already made up their minds. Silence, when done right, is louder than shouting. Instead, I made a call. Diane Keller answered on the second ring. "Walter Grayson," she said, "I was wondering when you'd reach out." Diane had been my attorney years ago, back when I was still working. Practical, direct, no patience for drama. "I need advice," I said, "about the house or the internet circus." She asked, "Both." She told me to come in that afternoon. Her office smelled like old books and fresh coffee. Comforting in a way, I handed her a folder: inspection reports, deed copies, screenshots Frank had sent me. She read quietly for a long time. Finally, she looked up. "You've done nothing wrong," she said, "legally or ethically." "That won't stop the noise," I replied. "No," she agreed, "but it changes how we respond." "I don't want to respond," I said, "not publicly." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good, let her talk." I raised an eyebrow. "That's it." "Not exactly," she said, "but the more she posts, the more she documents her own behavior. You stay quiet, we stay clean." She tapped the inspection report. "These renovations alone are a problem. If code enforcement gets involved, this becomes serious." "And Evan?" I asked. Her expression softened slightly. "He's in the middle, but he's still an adult." I leaned back in the chair. "She's trying to shame me into backing down." Diane smiled thinly. "That only works if you care more about your image than your position." "I don't," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why you came to me." She closed the folder. "There's something else." "What?" She hesitated just a beat. "Then you don't know everything yet." I felt my chest tighten. "About what?" "About Lauren," she said. "People who go this hard this fast usually have a reason: fear, leverage, something to lose." I frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," she said carefully, "that we learn who we're actually dealing with." I didn't say anything. "There are inconsistencies," she continued. "Financial choices that don't line up. Renovations without permits cost money. Social media campaigns take time and confidence. This isn't improvisation." "What are you saying?" I asked. She met my eyes. "I'm saying we might want to look deeper." "How?" She didn't answer right away. She reached into her desk drawer and slid a card across the table. "A name, a number, private investigator," she said. "Quiet, discreet, former law enforcement." I picked up the card and turned it over slowly. "I don't want to hurt my son," I said. Diane nodded. "Then the best thing you can do is make sure the truth comes out cleanly, all of it." I slipped the card into my pocket and stood up. Outside, my phone buzzed again. Another notification, another post, another comment. I didn't look. Because if Lauren thought public shame would bury me, she'd made one critical mistake. She assumed I was alone, and now I was about to find out what she was hiding. The investigator's name was Miles Carter. He didn't sound dramatic when he answered the phone. No sales pitch, no curiosity, just a steady voice that asked me two questions: what I needed and how quietly I wanted it done. "Very," I said. We met 2 days later at a small diner off the highway. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and burnt coffee that never quite tastes right. Miles was in his early 60s, neatly dressed, eyes that missed nothing. He listened more than he spoke. I told him about Lauren, the house, the inspection, the online smear. He nodded once. "I'll start with financials and prior residences," he said. "That's usually where the story is." "How long?" I asked. "Depends on how much there is," he replied. "But people who move fast tend to leave tracks." He was right. A week later, he called me and asked if I could come by his office. His tone had changed, sharper, focused. When I arrived, he handed me a thin file, not thick, not dramatic, just heavy in a way I couldn't explain. "Before you open it," he said, "I need to be clear. None of this is illegal to know, but once you know it, you can't unknow it." I opened the file. Lauren hadn't always been Lauren Grayson. Different last name, different city, same pattern. She'd left behind unpaid credit cards in 3 states. A personal loan she'd co-signed and never paid. A civil judgment from a former roommate who claimed Lauren emptied a joint account and disappeared. Miles pointed to one page. She married young, divorced within 18 months. The ex-husband claimed financial manipulation. Judge didn't rule on intent, but the debt trail was impressive. I swallowed hard. "There's more," Miles said. "She'd moved frequently, changed jobs often, always left behind just enough chaos to slow anyone trying to follow her. The renovations on my house, paid for with credit lines opened under Evan's name, lines he hadn't noticed because statements went to an email Lauren controlled. She isolated him," Miles said calmly. "Gradually, made herself the gatekeeper. That's not accidental." I stared at the papers, my hands cold. "Does Evan know?" I asked. "No," he said, "but he's paying for it." At the bottom of the file was a final page, a note. Lauren had recently inquired quietly about transferring property ownership in the event of a divorce. My chest tightened. She was planning an exit, Miles said. Your house was her safety net. I closed the folder. This wasn't about Christmas or disrespect or even me, it was about control and insurance. I thanked Miles and drove home slowly, the weight of what I'd learned settling deeper with every mile. By the time I reached my driveway, one truth was unavoidable. My son wasn't just being pushed aside, he was being set up. I sat at my kitchen table that night, the file in front of me unopened again. I thought about Evan as a how he used to ask me questions until I fell asleep answering them. How proud I'd been when he learned to stand on his own. Now he stood at a crossroads he didn't even know existed. I could expose everything, burn it down, force the truth into the open and let the fallout land where it may, or I could give him a choice. The next morning I called him. Dad, he answered cautiously. I need you to come over, I said, alone. There was a pause. Is this about Lauren? Yes, I replied, and about you. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, he said quietly, I'll be there. I looked down at the file once more as I ended the call. By the end of the day, my son would have to choose, and this time silence wouldn't protect him. Evan arrived just after sunset. He stood on my porch longer than necessary before knocking, like he was bracing himself for impact. When I opened the door, he didn't hug me, he didn't smile, he just nodded and stepped inside, eyes scanning the room as if he expected something to jump out at him. Dad, he said quietly. Sit down, I replied. He did, hands clasped together, bouncing one knee. I noticed how tired he looked, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders tense. This wasn't just stress, this was pressure. I went to the bookshelf and brought the file to the table. I didn't open it yet, I just set it between us. What's that? He asked. The truth, I said. He frowned. About what? About your wife, about the house, about what's been happening right under your nose. His jaw tightened. Dad, if this is another attack on Lauren. It's not an attack, I cut in gently, it's evidence. I opened the file and slid the first document toward him. Credit reports, highlighted sections, dates. He glanced down, then back up at me. What am I looking at? Debt, I said, in your name. That's impossible, he said immediately. I'd know. I slid another page forward, statements, addresses, an email he didn't recognize. Look closer, I said. He did, his breathing changed, shallow, uneven. She handles our finances, he muttered. She's just better at that stuff. I nodded. That's what she wanted you to believe. He pushed the papers back. This doesn't prove anything. So I showed him more, the inspection report, the illegal renovations, the permit violations. The estimates for repairs. They used credit lines opened under your name, I said, lines you never authorized. That's not true, he snapped, too fast, too loud. I leaned forward. Evan, read. He did this time slowly, thoroughly. I watched his face change with every page, confusion giving way to disbelief, disbelief cracking into fear. She wouldn't, he whispered. She loves me. I'm sure she does, I said softly, in her way. He stood abruptly and started pacing. You went digging, you hired someone. Yes, I said, because something didn't add up. He stopped and turned to me. You're trying to turn me against my own wife. I met his eyes. No, I'm trying to stop her from destroying you. He shook his head, hands gripping his hair. This can't be real. She said you were trying to control us, that you'd do anything to get your way. I stayed calm. Is this about control or about facts? He looked back down at the table, at the file, at the life he thought he understood. Why didn't I see this? He asked quietly. Because you trusted her, I said, and because you didn't think someone you loved would use you. He sank back into the chair, shoulders slumping. There's more, I said. He looked up, eyes glassy. More. I slid the final page toward him, the inquiry about transferring property ownership. She was planning ahead, I said, in case things didn't work out. His face drained of color. She asked about divorcing me, he whispered. She asked about securing the house, I corrected. Your house, my house. Silence filled the room, heavy, suffocating. She told me you were the problem, he said, that you hated her, that you were trying to break us up. I exhaled slowly. I never asked you to choose. He laughed bitterly. She did. He sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Then he spoke again. What do I do? I folded my hands. That depends on what you're willing to face. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. I need to talk to her, he said. Yes, I agreed, you do. He swallowed hard. She's not going to react well. No, I said, she won't. He stood up, determination mixing with fear. I'll confront her tonight. I shook my head, not alone. He paused. What do you mean? I mean this needs to be done properly, I said. With witnesses, with clarity, with no room for denial. He frowned. How? I looked at the calendar on the wall. We schedule it, I said, a conversation she can't dodge. When? He asked. Soon, I replied, very soon. He nodded slowly, then picked up his jacket. At the door he turned back. Dad, he said, if this is true. It is, I said. He opened the door and stepped into the night. As it closed behind him, I knew the calm was temporary because the truth was finally on the table and the confrontation was coming. We met 3 nights later, not at the house, not at my place either. Evan insisted on neutral ground, and for once I agreed with him. We chose a small conference room at Diane Keller's office, plain walls, long table, no distractions. The kind of room where words echo and excuses don't. I arrived early. Lauren arrived last. She walked in like she owned the space, chin high, coat still on, eyes already sharp. Evan followed a step behind her, shoulders tense, jaw locked. He didn't look at me at first. When he finally did, his expression was unreadable. All 3 of us. One table, this was the moment. Lauren sat without being invited, crossed her legs, smiled thinly. I assume this is about the house, she said, as if she were bored already. It's about the truth, I replied. She laughed softly. Your version of it. Evan cleared his throat. Lauren, just listen. She turned to him, surprised, not angry yet, just surprised. Listen to what? I slid the folder across the table. The same one Evan had seen 2 nights earlier. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. Lauren glanced at it, then back at me. I'm not going to play this game. You already did, I said calmly, for years. Her smile faded. Excuse me. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Credit accounts opened in Evan's name without his knowledge. That's ridiculous, she snapped immediately. He knew about those. Evan swallowed. I didn't. Her head whipped toward him. Yes, you did. No, he said louder now, I didn't. The room went still. Lauren stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. I slid another paper forward. Illegal renovations, no permits, structural damage. That's exaggerated, she said. Your inspector was biased. In this? I asked, placing the final page on the table. She glanced down just once. That was all it took. Her posture changed, just slightly, shoulders stiffened, jaw tightened. What is that? Evan asked. A property inquiry, I said, about transferring ownership in the event of divorce. Evan turned to her slowly. Lauren. She didn't answer. Lauren, he said again, voice shaking now. Why would you ask about that? She stood abruptly. Because your father has been threatening us. I didn't raise my voice. This inquiry predates any conversation about eviction. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something ugly flashed in her eyes. Evan stayed seated, frozen, like his body couldn't keep up with what his mind was processing. You told me my dad was controlling, he said quietly, that he was trying to manipulate us. She scoffed. He is. Then why hide dead in my name? He asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Answer him, I said. She turned on me. You set this up, you poisoned him against me. I shook my head. I gave him facts. Evan stood slowly, hands shaking. Did you plan to leave me? He asked. Take the house. Her face hardened. I was protecting myself. From what? He demanded. From ending up with nothing, she snapped. There it was. The room felt smaller, heavier. So I was insurance, Evan said softly, and the house was the payout. She laughed then, sharp, bitter. Don't act innocent. You like the life we had. Evan looked at me, then back at her. This is your choice, I said gently, not mine. He closed his eyes, took a breath. When he opened them again, something had shifted. I need space, he said, from you. Her head snapped toward him. You don't mean that. I do, he replied. I need time. We're not staying in the house. Her face flushed red. You can't do this to me, she said, voice rising. I'm not doing anything, he said. I'm choosing. She stared at him, then at me, and then she exploded. The sheriff's notice went up on a Tuesday morning. I didn't deliver it myself. I didn't need to. That kind of thing carries more weight when it comes from someone in uniform, someone neutral, someone who doesn't care about family dynamics or hurt feelings. Evan called me 10 minutes later. They're here, he said, breathless. Dad, the sheriff is here. I know, I replied. What do I do? He asked. I closed my eyes for a moment. You do what you should have done from the beginning, I said. You listen. I heard voices in the background, Lauren's voice, sharp and loud, cutting through everything else. This is harassment, she was shouting. You can't just kick people out of their home. The deputy's voice stayed calm, professional, unmoved. This is a legal notice, ma'am, he said. You have 30 days. Evan came back on the line. She's losing it. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. By that afternoon, the story was everywhere, not the truth, her version of it. Lauren posted photos of the notice taped to the front door. She filmed herself crying in the driveway, talking about betrayal, about being thrown out like trash. She tagged friends, family, people I'd never met. She used words like abuse and control and heartless. She didn't mention the deed, she didn't mention the debt, she didn't mention the illegal renovations. But this time something was different. People were asking questions. Why is the house in his name? Why wasn't it transferred years ago? Why are there liens showing up on public record? Lauren started replying aggressively, then deleting comments, then blocking people. The meltdown wasn't just public, it was frantic. Evan called again that night. His voice was flat now, drained. She says you planned this all along, he said, that you waited for the perfect moment. I waited for you to see, I replied. She keeps saying you ruined her life. I paused. What do you think? There was a long silence. I think, he said slowly, she ruined her own. The next day, Lauren showed up at my house. No warning, no call, just her car screeching to a stop in my driveway like she'd driven there on pure rage alone. I watched from the window as she got out, phone already in her hand, camera pointed at herself. I opened the door before she could knock. Get this on video, she sneered, holding the phone up. Let everyone see what kind of man you are. I won't speak to you like this, I said calmly, and you're trespassing. She laughed, loud, unhinged. You think you can scare me with the law? Yes, I said, because it's already working. Her smile vanished. You took everything from me, she said. You think I won't take something back? I looked at her steadily. You never had anything that wasn't borrowed. That did it, she screamed, right there on my front lawn, about money, about fairness, about how Evan was weak and how she carried everything. A neighbor peeked through their curtains. Someone across the street pulled out a phone. Control was slipping and she knew it. Court, she spat finally. We'll see what a judge says. I nodded. We will. She stormed off, tires squealing as she left. That evening, Diane called me. She's filed a motion, she said. Emergency injunction, claims emotional distress and wrongful eviction. Does she have a case? I asked. Diane laughed softly. No, but she has a date. I hung up and sat alone in my living room, the house quiet around me. For the first time in weeks, I felt tired, not scared, not angry, just tired. The spectacle was over. Now came the part where facts matter more than feelings. Now came the part where stories end and records begin. I looked at the calendar on the wall and circled the date. Diane texted me moments later. Court was set. And this time, Lauren wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand columns, no dramatic lighting, just wood benches, a raised desk, and the quiet hum of a place where arguments go to be tested by facts. I arrived early again. Old habit. Lauren arrived late. Same habit. She swept in with her attorney 10 minutes past the scheduled time, heels clicking too loudly, chin high like she was walking into a performance instead of a proceeding. Evan wasn't with her. That was the first thing I noticed. She glanced around the room, eyes searching. When she realized he wasn't there, her mouth tight. For the first time since this all began, she looked uncertain. Diane leaned toward me. Ready? She asked. I nodded. When the judge entered, everyone stood. He was an older man, gray-haired, glasses low on his nose. He looked tired in the way people do when they've heard every excuse before. Lauren's attorney spoke first. He talked about emotional distress, about family conflict, about how cruel it was to evict one's own child during the holidays. Painted a picture full of feelings and missing details. The judge listened without interrupting, no reaction, just notes. Then it was Diane's turn. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't dramatize. She simply laid the facts out in order: ownership, deeds, inspection reports, unpermitted renovations, debt incurred without authorization, screenshots of the online smear campaign. She handed copies to the clerk. Lauren's attorney objected twice. Both times the judge waved him off. Lauren shifted in her seat. Her confidence was evaporating by the minute. When Diane finished, the judge looked up for the first time and spoke directly to Lauren. Mrs. Grayson, he said, do you dispute that the property is legally owned by Mr. Walter Grayson? Lauren opened her mouth, closed it. Her attorney leaned over and whispered something. No, she said finally, but... Do you dispute that renovations were performed without permits? The judge continued. Her attorney tried to interject again. The judge held up a hand. I asked her. Lauren's voice wavered. No. Do you dispute that debt was incurred under your husband's name without his direct authorization? Silence. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The judge leaned back in his chair and removed his glasses. I don't see much to deliberate here, he said, my chest tightened, not with anxiety but with something like relief. He ruled quickly, efficiently. Eviction upheld, no injunction. 30 days stood. Legal fees awarded to me due to frivolous filing and documented harassment. Lauren gasped audibly. Her attorney whispered furiously. The judge looked at her one last time. You do not have standing in this property dispute. Any further attempts to interfere may result in sanctions. Gavel, once it was over, Lauren stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. Her face was pale now, stripped of performance, stripped of control. As she stormed out, she didn't look at me, not once. Deanne gathered her papers calmly. "Congratulations," she said, "you did everything right." I didn't feel triumphant, I felt steady. Outside the courthouse, reporters weren't waiting. There was no crowd, just a cold breeze and the quiet knowledge that the truth had done its work. That night I went home and made a simple dinner, no celebration, no toast. I sat at the table and ate slowly, letting the weight of the last few weeks finally lift. Then just after 9, my phone rang. "Evan, Dad," he said softly. "Are you okay?" I asked. There was a pause. "I'm alone." I closed my eyes. "I need to see you," he continued, "if that's okay." "It is," I said. "Come by tomorrow." Another pause, then, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I set the phone down and looked around the quiet room. The legal battle was over. The house was mine. But what mattered more was what was about to walk back through my door alone, humbled and finally ready to talk. And I knew the hardest conversation was still ahead. Evan came the next afternoon, just after 3. No jacket this time, no rushed steps. He knocked once and waited, hands at his sides like he wasn't sure he deserved to be let in. When I opened the door, he looked older somehow, not aged, just stripped down to something more honest. "I'm sorry," he said before I could speak. Not hi, not thanks for seeing me, just sorry. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once helped him with homework, where we'd shared late-night talks about life and mistakes and second chances. "I should have listened sooner," he said, staring at his hands. "I should have defended you. I let things slide because it was easier than confronting them. I didn't interrupt. Apologies lose their meaning when you rush them. She made me feel like choosing you meant losing her," he continued. "And I was scared of being alone." I nodded. "Fear makes people small." He looked up at me then, eyes red, honest. I didn't realize how much I'd already lost. We talked for hours, not just about Lauren, about patterns, about how he'd learned to confuse peace with avoidance, about how love doesn't require silence. I suggested therapy. He didn't flinch. "I already started," he said, "individually, and I'll keep going." That mattered to me more than anything else he could have said. A week later, he moved out of the house, not back to me, into a small apartment across town, modest, clean, his own. The house went on the market shortly after. People assumed I'd keep it, that I'd reclaim it as a victory. But walking through those rooms again, empty now, I realized something important. I didn't want it, too many altered memories, too many corners where silence had settled, so I sold it. Fair market value, no drama, no attachment. When the check cleared, I split it cleanly. I covered the repairs, paid off the debt Lauren had hidden in Evan's name. What remained I set aside, not as leverage, not as control, but as a quiet foundation for him. When he was ready, we didn't celebrate. We didn't pretend things were fixed overnight. Healing isn't loud. But on Sundays, he started calling again, not out of obligation, out of choice. The night before the sale closed, Evan stopped by once more. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," he said, "but I'd like to rebuild, slowly, if you're willing." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. After he left, I stood alone in my living room and realized something else. I hadn't lost a house. I'd gained my dignity back, and I'd got my son back, not because I demanded loyalty, but because I finally demanded respect. As I turned off the lights and went to bed, I felt lighter than I had in years, because tomorrow wasn't about endings anymore, it was about beginnings. Christmas morning was quiet, no rushing, no tension hanging in the air, no careful calculations about who might say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I woke up just after sunrise, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the streets slowly come alive. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful. Not the kind of peace that comes from pretending everything is fine, but the kind that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. I thought about how different this Christmas looked from the one I'd imagined when I was wrapping that navy sweater weeks earlier. There was no crowded table, no forced smiles, no walking on eggshells in a house where I wasn't welcome. And yet I felt fuller than I ever had. Evan came by later that afternoon, just him, no pressure, no schedule. He brought a small pie from a local bakery and a quiet smile that felt genuine instead of rehearsed. We didn't exchange gifts. We didn't need to. We talked about ordinary things, weather, work, a book he'd started reading, in therapy. At one point, he stopped mid-sentence and said, "I feel lighter." I nodded. "So do I." Boundaries have a way of doing that. They clear the fog. They show you who's willing to meet you where you stand and who only liked you when you were easier to control. For a long time, I thought dignity meant endurance, keeping my head down, absorbing discomfort for the sake of harmony. I was wrong. Dignity is knowing when to step back, when to stop explaining, when to let consequences speak in a language everyone understands. I didn't win because I outshouted anyone. I didn't win because I embarrassed someone publicly. I won because I stayed steady when others tried to provoke me. Silence protected me, paperwork defended me, truth did the rest. Later that evening, after Evan left, I sat alone again, this time by choice. I turned on the Christmas lights, poured myself another cup of coffee, and reflected on what the season had actually given me. Not reconciliation at any cost, not approval, not control, it gave me clarity. I learned that love doesn't mean unlimited access, that family doesn't get a free pass to erase you, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to say no without anger. If you're listening to this and you feel like you've been pushed aside, replaced, or quietly edited out of someone's life, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to step back, you are allowed to protect what you built, and you are allowed to stop begging for a seat at a table you paid for. People reveal themselves when you stop cushioning their choices. Christmas didn't give me my old life back. It gave me something better: peace, boundaries, and the dignity of knowing I didn't lose myself trying to keep others comfortable. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced betrayal, manipulation, or the slow pain of being pushed aside, subscribe for more stories like this. Stories where truth matters, where dignity wins, and where quiet strength outlasts noise. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't showing up where you're unwanted. It's knowing when to walk away and still stand tall. If someone tells you not to show up, sometimes the strongest move is owning the door.